G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and today we're going to be doing my 3D printer recommendations. So I did a video last weekend talking about 3D printers, and I gave some recommendations on our Facebook page, but obviously most people aren't on our Facebook page. So I want to take this opportunity to talk about my picks, and these picks are based on beginners, so people who haven't 3D printed before and want to get into it. So I'm trying to pick printers that are all around the same price point with a similar level of quality of print, ease of use, decent community around them. So for example, a printer like a Prusa, for instance. Prusas are very expensive. They're good printers, but because of their prohibitive price, I don't think they are suited to people who are new to 3D printing. I think they're a printer that comes along later once you understand the principles behind 3D printing and the machines and how they work, and you gain a bit of an understanding of the technology. They're not what I would recommend for a person. So, with that in mind, first up is the Ender 3 V2. Now, there's an affiliate link in the video below, so if you do want to buy a Creality printer, such as an Ender 3, you can click on that link, and it will take you there, and if I'm lucky I might see a cut of the proceeds. But don't worry, if it's not your cup of tea, I'm not going to be offended. Pick the printer that suits your needs most. So my pick for the best 3D printer for a person who's getting into creating scenery, terrain for themselves, maybe simplified titans and tanks. I mean, you can get some very good quality out of these printers, but it's difficult. My pick is the Ender 3 V2. Now, why the V2 over the typical Ender 3? Well, the basic Ender 3 is about $100 cheaper, and the basic Ender 3 is a worse machine in pretty much most of the ways that matter. It has smaller extrusions for the frame. So the frame itself, that all the working parts move on, is smaller, and because of that, it means that you have reduced rigidity. Now, rigidity is everything. The more rigid everything is, the more stable, the more solid, the better the print quality you're going to get. So naturally, the bigger printer has certain benefits. The larger extrusions mean it's a lot more solid as a platform. The second big thing that this brings is the belt tensioners. Oh, the belt tensioners are amazing. On my Ender 3 Pro, which is the model just below this one, it doesn't have those belt tensioners. Instead, it relies on you to physically undo some bolts and pull the belts tighter and then do up the bolts whilst you're holding the belt under tension. If you don't do this right, or you don't tweak it correctly, it will mess up your prints. You get the slip of the prints thanks to the belts not riding correctly in the gears, because these are toothed belts. It will really ruin your day when you're 20 odd hours into a print and the whole thing layer shifts to the side. So just for this quality of life change, it's worth it, but there's more to it. It comes with some little creature comforts, slightly different user interface, comes with a little drawer underneath, not necessary things. And look, to be honest, XY axis tensioners, you can buy them on things like eBay or AliExpress for like $20. They're not hugely expensive. So again, why pick this over the basic model? Well, one of the other things this does that the basic model doesn't is it runs off the silent driver, the TMC2208 that you see on screen. What does that mean to the layman? It means that all the motors that run on this thing, apart from the fans for cooling the electronics, run very, very quietly. If you run a regular Ender 3, they are very noisy. So, my tip to you is, if you are going to be running a printer like this in a household, this is the one you want, because it is going to operate very quietly. Now, if you're not running it in your house, you're running it in a separate workshop or a detached building, maybe you could just go an Ender 3 or an Ender 3 Pro. I think the Ender 3 Pro is great, but I run mine in a separate workshop, and having it out there works better for me. Another great thing this comes with is the glass bed. Now, the glass bed is a luxury item. You don't need it, but it also means it gives you more variety of materials that you can print with later on. So, options. All of those things combined are why I think the Ender 3 V2 is a really great printer. Now, you could buy a Ender 3 or an Ender 3 Pro and upgrade them to this standard. Yes, but you're spending your time, your labor, and your money, and you're going to spend more money than just buying one of these out the gate, which is part of why I suggest it. So, this is my number one pick, and the biggest thing of all that actually influences my picks today is the fact that they have a big community behind them. So, not only are these good printers, but if you have a problem, there are people out there who have the answer for you, and they're not hard to find. Whereas other brands that aren't as established, they are. It can be a real pain in the butt if you've got problems with your printer, but your printer is kind of, I won't say rare, but more uncommon. It means you really have to troll around to find the correct answer to your problem. Whereas when you pick a printer which has hundreds of thousands of users globally, well, it's very easy to find someone who's had the same problem as you and find a forum that suits your purposes. So that's why I picked this one. Now, with that, there are two upgrades I'm going to share in this video, and it kind of applies to the other printers as well, but specifically to the Ender 3 V2. And that is, no matter what Ender model you get, you want to upgrade to an aluminium extruder drive feed replacement. As you can see, it's pretty damn cheap. The basic one that comes with the unit is plastic, and as I've shown people in my previous video, they break. They just crack, usually around the point where it's pivoting off. Because they crack, it means they don't apply tension to the filament doesn't feed correctly, and the print doesn't work. So this upgrade, it basically comes, all the tools you need, you have already. They come with the printer. This upgrade will take you about 15 minutes to do. You unscrew 4 bolts off the original, and then you screw a new 4 or 5 bolts in on this one. Fantastic. And it will save you a ton of pain. So not only am I trying to recommend you guys printers, I'm trying to recommend you the things you can do to make your printing experience better. And this is one of them. Belt tensioners, feed drive replacement. The third one, and this is a pretty major, is leveling springs. You can get them cheaper than this. This gives you a lifetime's worth of leveling springs right here. You can get them cheaper than this. So don't feel like, again, you have to go and do it with brand loyalty. You could hop on AliExpress and pick up 4 of these springs for like $5. Doesn't matter to me, but I'm going to show you the official ones because, you know, if you wanted to buy a printer, you could go get the extruder, get the springs all at once and install it all on the same day. Trust me, it's worth doing because one of the things that you have to do on these printers is often to level the bed. So the bed or the build plate is a piece of aluminium, and then it has some sort of surface on top of it, whether it's plastic, whether it's glass, that you print onto. And because that surface is not perfectly aligned with the other parts of the printer, instead you have to level it in order to make it align. And the way you do that is by adjusting it by winding screws. And those screws are under spring tension, and the springs that come with these printers are crap. They always were, and they always will be. It just is the way it is. Unless you start spending a decent amount of money on these printers, over $300 US, then you generally get lower quality parts. And so I highly suggest these because getting bed leveling right is crucial to getting good prints. If you don't adhere the part to the bed correctly, it just falls off while you're printing, and you come in the morning and it looks like a bird nest in the middle of your printer. So don't do it, guys. Just go out, buy the springs to upgrade with. And again, some people might go, well, I should be able to buy a product off the shelf and it should just work. Yep, that would be great. You need to spend another $100 to $200 in that case. And I mean, these printers will work stock off the shelf without these two upgrades. But you're going to make your future self happier with the upgrades. Take it or leave it. Moving on now. A good pick for a printer here is the Artillery Genius. So, this printer, basically the same features, different brand. Artillery gives you a touchscreen interface, which is nice. It's color, which is visually more appealing to look at. The platform that it's actually built on, having everything integrated into a single unit in the base, very nice, very rigid, good little design feature. It's also got the same silent driving. It has filament run-out detection. And what that means is, as the filament is feeding in, if you run out of it, it will stop the print where it is and wait for you to put new stuff in. It won't just keep going and printing air. Lovely little quality of life upgrade right there. But you're paying a little extra money over the previous printer for it. So, trade-offs there. Also, Artillery, fantastic. Great brand. Less people own them than own Creality printers. So, trade-off there. It's going to be harder to get the support you need for this printer. But, as I said, wouldn't be listing it if I didn't think it was a really good printer. And you'll find that most of the printers I talk about today, I've either used or I know someone who I'm close to who has them, and I've been able to play with them myself. I'm not going to recommend you guys crap. Another good thing on this is you'll notice that the filament feeder up the top isn't just a handle that slots through the center of the roll. It's actually a roller bearing block. And what this means is you have very smooth feeding of the filament into the actual printer. So really, really good little device right there. So these are the sort of things you've got to think about when it comes to printing. Next one on this list here is the i3 Mega S from Anycubic. So, mostly integrated base unit, which is great, and a good little printer. It has very good cable management, it's very rigid, and it comes in at a good competitive price. Also has a pretty decent build area. So, another great buy, but you will probably need to do a couple of upgrades to it to really see its full potential. Like the V2, the Ender 3 V2, it doesn't have the ideal springs for its bed leveling, and it doesn't have the ideal spool holder offset to the side. So these are some things that you might want to consider upgrading down the line. But it also has a lot of things that go in its favor. Very smooth operation, very rigid operation, really good brand with excellent after-service support, and Anycubic is a very big brand like Creality, which means that it is very easy to find people who have this equipment and they're able to give you their own knowledge base for you to draw upon, which is very handy. So Anycubic, good printers. I do rate them. So I would be happy to own any of these printers here. Now we're going to move on to some resin printers now. So again, I'm going to start with Anycubic. So the Anycubic Photon was my introduction to resin 3D printing. And since then I have my own, and I've also made a lot of stuff on a few friends' ones. Now the Photon itself is getting harder and harder to find, because I think they've stopped making them. Don't quote me on it, but you can't find them on their website, and they seem to be less common now online. But there's still a heap around if you want to go that way. My pick here is the Photon Mono SE. So, why the Mono? So, the Mono is the one I picked because of the screen. So the Mono refers to the monochrome screen, which means that it's only got an LCD screen that's black and white. Very important, because it means that when you are using a regular LCD screen, they also have red, blue, green, or RGB. And shining the ultraviolet light through those multiple layers, the red, green, and blue layer, and then through the black layer, means that it's very inefficient compared to a monochrome screen like this one when it comes to printing your miniatures. This means that you have a lot slower print time, usually around half the speed that something like this can achieve. So not only do you get a very clean print, but it's much faster to go with this one, and the price difference over at Anycubic is pretty negligible. So there's pretty much no drawbacks to it, and I mean, it's a fantastic price. So definitely one to look into if you're that way inclined. And at this point in the video, I'd just like to reiterate that these sort of printers are ideal for fine detail parts. You're talking weapons for titans, building whole infantry models from scratch, which you'll get to see me do some of next week. You'll also get to make parts for, say, Space Marines. You could do helmets, weapons, things like that. You can create planetary empires tiles, all sorts of stuff that's a finer detail you do in these. And I mean, there are much bigger ones you could get. than these, and we'll talk about that later. But this is an introductory video to people who haven't done the printing before, and I don't recommend going from no printer to a $1,000 printer. I think that's silly. You need to learn the technology first. Make your mistakes with something you can afford to damage. So, also speaking of quality of life improvements, if you're going to buy a printer like the Photon Mono here, then get a wash and cure. And the reason I picked an Anycubic wash and cure to go with the Anycubic printer is the parts are designed to fit together, which means you're able to take parts of your printer that are contaminated with the resin. And remember, the resin is a nasty substance. It's carcinogenic, it's an irritant, it will cause rashes on your skin. The fumes are very bad for you. Thankfully, a lot of it's filtered out by the printer. But that resin will get onto the working parts of the printer, and if you need to clean them, this thing is designed to be able to hold those parts in it whilst cleaning. Not only that, you can take the models off the build plate once you've washed them, and then place them onto the actual bed of the printer for curing. The wash and cure, not the printer for curing. My apologies. This is something you'll see repeated through the next two printers that I talk about. The exact same thing. So we wash it and then we cure it. And this is because the resin, whilst cured, can be slightly tacky inside. It can have internal inconsistencies, and we don't want that. We want to make our resin nice and solid before we go painting it, sanding it, doing any prep work to it. That's where these wash and cures come in, and although you don't need them to hobby, you could buy the printer on its own. I recommend them because it's like having a washer and dryer combo. It goes together and it makes your life a lot easier. You don't have to take all that laundry outside, hang it all up, hope it doesn't rain. No, you can just put the laundry straight into the dryer and click a button and it's all going to come out nice and warm and dry. Well, this is kind of like that. You don't have to sit there with a toothbrush scrubbing the models with isopropyl alcohol in a cup. You just dunk the model straight in this thing, hit the go button, and it'll do everything for you. It's great. And then you don't have to fish the models out afterwards and sit them on a windowsill for 2 days to cure. Instead, you can print some models, and then the same day you could start painting those models with this thing. Moving on from there, Creality. So, another monochrome printer here. And in this one, you can buy the bundle, the printer and the wash and cure. Again, units that are matched to one another, so you can take the working parts out of the printer and put them into the wash and cure to clean them. Now, none of these printers really have any benefits over one another, and you'll notice that because obviously they're based at around the same price point, they're about the same size build plates, they're about the same level of print quality, and they pack many of the same features like touch screens and filters and things like that. The idea here is not to give you, this is the top range, this is the bottom range. No, the idea here is to give you an idea of the printers that I recommend for the beginning hobbyist. Not the best 3D printer in the world. If you want the answer to that, I'm afraid I don't have it, and it's not a hobbyist printer in any case. It's going to be an industrial printer. Anyway, Creality printers. Again, big name brand, just like Anycubic. You will get customer support from the company, but you'll also get massive community support because there's a lot of them out there and people understand how these things work. So, something to look into, something to think about if you're going to be getting into this and printing a lot of miniatures. If you do go down the road of getting resin 3D printers, also think about how many of them you're going to get, because some people like to have multiples, and if you're going to get multiples, you want to be able to stick with the same brand, and the LD002H, being a newer printer, means that they're going to be in production for a while, which means you're able to get a lot of the same printer. Okay, and this is important, because if you want to be using the same wash and cure and fit all the parts in neatly and have very similar settings that you can just basically cut paste from printer to printer, that's what you want. If you get too many different printers, it becomes a pain in the butt, because then when you slice things, you need to account for every printer's individual things. No, stay away from that. If you're going to have more than one, you want some uniformity, is what I'm getting at. So, moving on. Illego Mars. So, Illego Mars, in this case, it's the 2 mono, and same reason as the others. It's a monochrome screen, so faster print speed, better quality. it's a really good printer. Lagoo is a really, really good brand, and I've got a bunch of Illego resin at the moment that I'm using for my resin printer, and I highly rate them. And one of my friends, he has the Saturn, and he has an original Mars, not the Mars 2. Both of them are fantastic units, and he prints some pretty cool stuff, but he's always doing stuff on it, so I never get to print the stuff I want to print for me on his, which is why I bought my own resin printers for me. And yeah, fantastic units, and that's why I recommend them. And as you can see, a very competitive price point if you buy in at the right time. So something to think about right there. But again, just like the previous printers, very similar functionality. So none of these printers really have it over one another. Another one here is the Lagoo washing curing machine. So this obviously syncs up with the Lagoo printer that I just showed, and the working parts are designed to fit into all the same things I was saying before. Washes the miniatures, cures the miniatures. Now, some people are probably curious. I spoke about some upgrades earlier on for the Creality Ender 3 V2, upgrades which I think carry over to many other brands. So spring tensioning for the build plates, metal extruders. Well, when it comes to resin printers, there's not a huge amount of upgrading you can do. You can do something like changing out the build plates or changing out the screens. It can be done. There are different things you can play with, but on the whole, they're not hugely upgradable. So people then start to say things like, well, maybe I don't want a Anycubic photon, maybe I don't want an Illego Mars, and I want to go something bigger like an Illego Saturn. Well, that's great. You will get, probably 80% more build space on it, but you still won't be making huge things. You're going to pay a lot of extra money for it. Now, is that trade-off worth it to you to jump straight to it? Because, all of these brands here have much bigger, much better printers available. But then you're not having a hobby tool that you can use to knock up knickknacks with. Instead, you're making quite a large investment into a piece of machinery. And at what point is it getting too big for your needs? That's something you can assess on an individual basis. But even then, it might not be big enough, and you might have to start looking at something like a Formlabs printer if you want to be printing things that are, Land Raider sized straight out the gate. That's an option that is available to you on those bigger printers, but you're going to be paying like $3,000 for it, or you can come in here and pay, $200 for a fantastic resin printer and another $100 on top of that for a curing station. And it's going to do everything you need to do for really basic stuff. And there's nothing stopping you from, if you had a Land Raider that you wanted to make, you could make it in pieces on these printers and glue them together later. Now, of course, the natural question one might ask then is, hey, if I've got to build and paint and all that with these resin miniatures, why not just go to a company like Games Workshop or Forge World and buy their miniatures where they've done all the hard work for me? Especially at the price of one of these printers. Well, put it this way. If I was to buy a Forge World miniature today, how many miniatures could I get for the price of these printers? Because one of these printers is, let's say $250, $300 US. $250, $300 US is not going to get you too much stuff from Forge World. It'll pretty much get you 3 5-man Terminator squads of Legion Terminators for Horus Heresy, for instance, for the same price as one of these printers. The thing is, once you've got one of these printers, though, and you download a few files for these printers to print out, files that are quite often free, I'll add, then you can make as many models for yourself as you like, and all you need to do it is resin. So, you tell me, what's the better investment for you? Paying $50 for a kilo of resin, which will make you, good 40, 50 Terminators? Or would you, Terminators that can be your personal design choices, by the way? Or would you rather invest all that money into a product that's a once-off? You buy some Blood Angels Terminators, they're always going to be Blood Angels Terminators. There's only so many times you can strip the paint off, repaint them, try and convert them. There's only so many things you can do with it. But with one of these, with a resin printer, the world is your oyster. I run both because I have needs of both. I want to print miniatures for myself that I can use on the tabletop that are high quality. Resin printer all the way. But I also am trying to make a bunch of tables for an event I'm hosting at the end of the year. Fantastic. Filament printers all the way. There's a range of options there for me. And, filament printers you can say something similar with as well. At what point is the printer getting too expensive for your needs, though? So the most expensive one I bought was an Ender 3 V2. A CR10 V2. And I also bought an Ender 5. 3 different printers with 3 different sizes, profiles, working limits, and build ratios. And they do different things for me. So the CR10 is great at building really big objects. It's really quiet, does a fantastic job. But you're going to pay double what you're going to pay for an Ender 3 V2, and you're going to get not a huge amount more out of it for the money, unless you have a specific need for that. So that's the kind of thing I'm getting at here. It's kind of like when you go out and buy a car. If anyone here has bought a new car, you know that you have a range of options. Cars come in all different levels. Your base model, which people tend to stay away from, but if they don't have a lot of money, they get. Then you have your mid-range model, which is where most of us go to, because it's got a lot of the creature comforts that you want in a car, all the accessories. And then you've got the level above that, the luxury levels, and that's where you get all the leather seats and the heated seats and the crap that, look, you don't need, but you can have. Printers are very much the same. Yeah, you can buy a really basic printer. Let's pick an Ender 3. But it's not going to be anywhere near as comfortable as an Ender 3 V2. Or you can go to that luxury car. You can go up and get that Ender 5 Plus, and you're going to get a fantastic printer, something that you'll never want to upgrade. It's basically perfect right out the box. But it's going to cost you $800 US, give or take. So, is the luxury model worth it? To some people, yes. But your individual needs come first, guys. So, that's some thoughts I have on 3D printers, and these are my suggestions to people who are new into the hobby. Now, it doesn't mean you discount options. Like I said earlier, something like a Prusa branded printer is fantastic. Anycubic have a Viper, a different type of printer, very similar to the Ender 3 that's just come out. Good printers. But if I don't have experience with them, or if I think they're too expensive for the person who's getting into this hobby, that's not what I would suggest. And a lot of the printers that are available to you for $100 or $200 more might have things like auto bed leveling built in. Fantastic, great feature to have, until the auto bed leveling plays up on you, and now you've got to try and deal with a bunch of electronics issues on top of your other issues with your printer. Plus, they can be a pain to set up because you have to do things like Z offsetting with a BL Touch. I have a BL Touch out there. I haven't set it up for that reason. I can't be stuffed doing that. And so I'd rather just sit there and manually wind some dials on my printer. Such is life. Anyway, back with the outer circle. Hope this wasn't too confusing for people. The next video on printers that I do, I'll be talking about upgrades and things that I've done to my filament printers. And I've got a video that will be coming in the next week or two, probably 2, where I'll be printing some miniatures in my Anycubic Photon just to show people what it's like to print 28mm scale miniatures. And at the same time, the files I work on are going to be from a miniatures STL creator. And I want to review their product, so I figure I can do that at the same time as I create miniatures of theirs. So, knock out 2 birds with 1 stone in that. I also have some Horus Heresy related videos up my sleeve, but they've been in development hell for a while because I'm just waiting to see where the game's headed in the next couple months. But it doesn't seem like Forge World or Games Workshop or Warhammer Community are going to give us any real meat to work with, so I might just release them and see how we go. Rite of War videos. And yeah, we'll go from there. Anyway, back to the outer circle. Hope everyone had a lovely working week. I know I did, and I'm very tired. I'm going to go get some rest. See you all next time.